There is a town in America where the money stopped moving in 1997 and never came back. On one side of Callaway Street, 9 bays, LED lights, leather chairs, a sign that burned so bright it throws shadows at noon. On the other side, one lift, one man, a sign so faded you have to already know what it says to read it. The camera finds him at 4:40 in the morning, dark kitchen, cold floor. An envelope on the table he has read 3 times and keeps reading anyway. The kind of horror that doesn't change no matter how many times you unfold it. $18,000. 24 ways. He puts it in his pocket, cracks 2 eggs into a pan, and somewhere out on the county road, 11 miles away, a $60,000 car is moving through the rain with something wrong underneath it. The driver isn't stopping.
The alarm went off at 4:40 in the morning. James Smith didn't wait for the second beep. He never waited for the second beep. Not in 11 years. Not once. Because the second beep meant Maya might hear it. And Maya hearing it meant she'd worry. And Maya worrying at 8 years old about whether her father had slept was something James had decided a long time ago was not going to happen on his watch. He lay there in the dark for exactly 1 minute. That was the deal. 1 minute to be a 38-year-old widower with concrete dust in his lungs and $41 in a cash register and a mortgage on a building the bank was currently trying to digest. 1 minute to be tired. 1 minute to be the kind of tired that doesn't come from working, the other kind. The kind that settles in the bones around year 3 of doing everything alone and never quite leaves. Then the minute was over. And he got up. The floor hit his feet like a punishment. Cold. The kind of cold that meant the furnace had cycled off again, which meant the furnace was still broken, which meant the $400 it would cost to fix it was still the $400 he didn't have, which meant the space heater in Maya's room was still doing the work of a whole house on the shoulders of one small appliance, that James was genuinely afraid to think about too hard. He'd told her he liked the cold. She'd looked at him, with those eyes, 8 years old, already operating at a frequency most adults never reached, and said, "Dad, you're the worst liar in America." He smiled about it now in the dark, pulling on the same coveralls he'd worn yesterday, and the day before. Brooks stitched over the hardened thread that used to be red and had faded to the color of old brick, except it wasn't Brooks anymore. It was Smith. It had always been Smith. The coveralls had belonged to his father, and the name on the chest was Robert Smith, and James had just never gotten around to having it changed in 15 years, which probably said something about him that he didn't have the energy to examine. Before 5 a.m. Down in the kitchen, he cracked 2 eggs into the pan, started the coffee, stood with both hands flat on the counter, and listened to the house the way you listen to an engine you don't quite trust, for the sound that tells you something's about to go wrong. Then he looked at the envelope on the table. It had been sitting there for 6 days. He'd opened it once, read it once, folded it back up, and set it down, and made himself a rule: don't pick it up again. Men always break that rule. Men always pick at it. Like a scab. Like pressing a bruise to confirm it's still there. He picked it up anyway. Final notice. Commercial property loan. Smith Auto and Tire. Past due $18,240. Payment in full required within 30 days, or the institution will proceed with foreclosure proceedings. 30 days. 6 of them were gone. He heard the stairs creak and had the envelope folded and back in his pocket before her foot hit the bottom step. "You're up early." He said it without turning around. "So are you." "I'm always up early. I'm the dad. That's the job." Maya Smith came down the stairs in her school clothes, with her hair already done. She'd been doing it herself for 2 years, ever since the morning James had attempted a ponytail, and she'd looked in the bathroom mirror with the expression of someone reviewing a crime scene and asked, very gently, if he had done it on purpose. She climbed onto the stool at the counter and pulled her backpack up beside her like it was a passenger. "Eggs again. You want to take it up with the chef?" "You're the chef. Then you know where to file the complaint." She laughed. God, that laugh. It had sounded like her mother since she was 4 years old, and it wrecked James every single time, and he had never once let her see it. Not once. He slid the plate in front of her and leaned on the counter and watched her eat the way he did every morning, because this, right here, these 12 minutes before the bus came, was the only part of the day that belonged entirely to him. "Dad, yeah. Are we okay?" He didn't blink. He'd gotten good at not blinking. What kind of question is that? Maya pushed a piece of egg around her plate. Bethany Cray said something. James straightened up slowly. Very slowly. Said what? She said her dad said your shop is closing. A pause. She said her dad said you're a. She stopped. Say it. I don't want to say it. Maya. He kept his voice level. The same voice he used when he needed her to understand something mattered. If somebody says something about your dad, you can say it in this kitchen. Anything that gets said out there, you can say in here. This kitchen is safe. She looked up. She said her dad said you're a charity case pretending to be a business. The coffee maker gurgled. Outside, a truck went by on the street, with a bad exhaust, muffler cracked on the passenger side. James identified it in about a half second. Without meaning to, the way a man, who has spent 15 years listening to engines identifies these things the way other people identify birdsong. Bill Hurley's pickup. He'd mentioned it twice. Okay, James said. That was it. Just, okay. Maya looked at him. That's it. Okay. What do you want me to do, sweetheart? Drive over to Bethany Cray's house before sunrise and argue with a third grader? You could argue with her dad. James exhaled through his nose. Her dad's got a $30,000 alignment machine and a sign that lights up at night. That's what he's got. Now let me ask you something. He leaned forward on the counter. What do I have? Maya didn't hesitate. Not for a single second. Me. James had to look at the window for a moment. The gray was just starting to come up over the roofline. Just the first thin edge of it, barely enough to call light. That's right, he said. That's exactly right. So let Michael Johnson have his sign. She ate for a moment. Then, quietly, it's still not fair. No, James said. It's not. He didn't tell her it was. He never told her things were fair when they weren't. He'd lied about the furnace. He'd lied about liking the cold. But he had made himself a promise the year his wife died, that he would never look his daughter in the face and tell her the world was fair, because one day she was going to find out the truth of it. And when that happened, he wanted her to hear it from a man who loved her, not from a stranger who didn't. Smith Auto and Tire sat at the dead end of Callaway Street, where the town's money had stopped flowing sometime around 1997 and never found its way back. Cinder block, 2 bays, 1 lift, a hand-painted sign, so sun-bleached that in direct light you could pick out the letters S, M, T, A, and T, I, R, if you already knew what you were looking for and were willing to do the interpretive work. A gravel lot, with a pothole in the northwest corner that James had been filling with the same half-empty bucket of cold patch for the better part of 6 years. And directly across the street, this was the part that never stopped being remarkable, that James suspected God had designed specifically to test something in him, sat Cray Precision Automotive. 9 bays, LED sign, a waiting room with leather chairs and a coffee machine that made 4 different things, and a television bolted to the wall showing sports with the sound off. Michael Johnson had bought the lot in 2017 and built it facing James's shop window to window, front door to front door, the way a man builds a mansion directly across from a smaller house so he can look at it while he eats breakfast. James unlocked his bay door at 6:15, rolled it up, turned on the lights. The third fluorescent tube flickered 3 times and died the way it had been threatening to for a month, guttering out with a sound like a small argument going nowhere. Of course, James said to it. He was under the Buick by 6:40. He heard the laughing before he heard footsteps. He always heard Michael's laugh before anything else. It was that kind of laugh, the kind that fills a street, that bounces off cinder block, that carries the specific acoustic signature of a man who has never once told a joke at his own expense. Michael Johnson crossed Callaway Street at a little after 7 with his coffee in a Cray Precision Automotive mug, wearing a Cray Precision Automotive polo, with a young man named Gary trailing behind him the way a satellite trails a planet, close enough to be pulled by the gravity, too far away to matter. Cal, buddy. Michael called it, while he was still crossing, then caught himself. James. Sorry, James. James rolled out from under the Buick, but didn't stand up. Just looked up from the floor. Michael, how's business? Business is business. Michael looked around the shop, the way a man looks at a property he's about to lowball. Slow, deliberate, taking inventory of every cracked floor tile and every dead light tube and every shelf that hadn't been reorganized since 2019. You know, Donna Ellis came to see me last week? Wanted a break job. James said nothing. Quoted her 640. Michael sipped his coffee. She says, and here his voice went up into something approximating a frail elderly woman, which it did not remotely resemble. She says, well, James does it for 200. Gary laughed. Right on cue. Half a second late, like a laugh track. She's 74 years old, Michael. And she drives to dialysis twice a week on a fixed income, with a hip that's been giving her trouble since 2021. That's her situation. Michael spread his free hand. His gesture took in the whole of Smith Auto and Tire, the cracked concrete, the dead sign, the single lift, the bucket of cold patch in the corner, in one slow, sympathetic wave that wasn't sympathetic at all. And look what your situation got you. 15 years, James. 15 years, and you can't replace a light bulb. He set the mug down on James's workbench without asking. You know what they call you, over at the diner? I've heard it. The charity mechanic. I've heard it. It's not a compliment. James stood up, wiped his hands on the shop rag. Michael was a big man, broad through the shoulders, the kind of build that came from a gym membership and a good diet rather than from work. But James was bigger, had always been bigger. And there was that half second, the one that existed every single time they were in the same room, where Michael remembered that and shifted his weight slightly and covered the shift with another sip of coffee. Was there something you actually needed, Michael? Just being neighborly. A pause that felt prepared. Actually, he snapped his fingers, like something had just occurred to him. Nothing ever just occurred to Michael Johnson. Little bird tells me the bank sent you some paperwork. The rag stopped moving in James's hands. Where'd you hear that? Small town. Michael smiled. Gordon over at First Cumberland plays golf with my brother-in-law on Thursdays. Don't get upset. I'm not here to pile on. I'm here to help. He spread both arms. James, listen, I'll take the lot off you. Whole thing, building, land, whatever's left on the shelves. I'll settle the bank and put 10 grand cash in your pocket, and you walk away clean. James looked at him for a long moment. How much is the lot worth, Michael? Well, that depends on. The county assessment is $68,000. James said it flat. I've got the paperwork right here in the drawer. $68,000 for the land alone. More if the county ever runs the bypass extension through Callaway, which they've been talking about since 2020. Michael's smile stayed on his face. It just stopped doing anything. So what you're offering me, James said, is roughly 15 cents on the dollar. On account of me being desperate. I'm offering you a rope, James. You're offering me a rope with a knot in it. Gary laughed at that one too, then realized what he'd done and went quiet. Michael's jaw worked. He turned and started back across the street, then stopped halfway, turned around, and James could see it on him the way you can see when a man has been carrying a sentence in his mouth all morning, rolling it around, waiting for the right moment to set it down. You know what your problem is, James? You think being a good man is a business plan. James looked at him across the gravel. No, James said. I just think it's the only thing I've got that you can't buy. Michael stared at him for a moment, then laughed, the ugly version of his laugh, not the street-filling one, and walked back to his 9 bright bays. Gary lingered by the door. He had a face like an apology looking for somewhere to land. Mr. Smith. He started. He don't mean. He means every word of it, Gary. James rolled back under the Buick. That's the only honest thing about him. Donna Ellis came in at 9:20. She came the way she always came, sideways through the door, already apologizing before she'd said anything, both hands wrapped around her coin purse like she was afraid it might escape. Her hip was bad today. James could tell from the way she was managing the step. James, honey, I am so sorry. Morning, Miss Donna. I know I said I'd have the rest of it by the 1st, and I did have it set aside, I truly did, but Ruth Ann's boy got sick, and they had to drive down to Nashville for the specialist, and I gave her the gas money, because what was I supposed to do? And I know that's not your problem. That is not your problem at all. James came around the counter and put one hand flat on it, palm down. Easy. The way you'd settle a nervous animal. Stop. Breathe. She stopped. She breathed. What's the car doing? Her chin trembled. It's making the grinding noise again. The same one. and I've got dialysis Thursday, and Ruthan's still in Nashville, and I can't. Pull it in. James. Miss Donna. He leaned on the counter. I'm going to say this once, and then we're going to talk about something else, because this is not a conversation I'm willing to have more than once. He waited until she looked at him. When Carol passed, you showed up at my door every Sunday for 6 months, with chicken and dumplings. Every Sunday. You never called ahead. You never asked if I wanted it. You just showed up and put it on the counter and sat with Maya for an hour while I pretended to do paperwork in the back and actually just sat on the floor and didn't move. He let that settle. You want to know what your credit is worth in this shop? It's worth more than money. Pull the car in before I lose my patience. She pressed her fingers under her eyes. You're a good boy. I'm 38. You're a good boy. Harder this time. Like she was entering it into the record. He got the car up on the lift. The rear brakes were metal on metal. Not almost, completely. She'd been driving on grinding iron and prayer for at least 3 weeks. He had a set of pads on the shelf he'd been holding to sell. $84 of inventory. He looked at the pads. He looked at the envelope in his back pocket. He thought about $18,000. He thought about 30 days minus 6. He took the pads off the shelf and put them on Donna Ellis's car. Across the street, through the window, Michael Johnson watched him do it. Said something to Gary. They both laughed. James tightened the caliper bolt and didn't look up. Thomas Rodriguez arrived at 2 o'clock in khakis and a rental car haircut and a leather portfolio he set on James's counter with the deliberate care of someone serving a legal document. He was maybe 30. Nice-looking kid, probably. Probably had a wife and a starter house and a boss who made him do this. Mr. Smith, I want you to know this isn't personal. It never is. The institution has been more than patient with. My father banked at First Cumberland for 22 years, James said. Shook Bill Cumberland's hand in 1989. That was the loan. The whole thing. A handshake. First Cumberland was acquired in 2019. I know when it was acquired. Thomas cleared his throat. Opened the portfolio. $18,240. 24 days remaining. A pause. Do you have a plan, Mr. Smith? James looked at him. Really looked. Thought about what it cost a man to drive out here every day and do this to people. My plan is I open at 6:15 and I close at 7, and I fix whatever comes through that door, and I do it right the first time, so it doesn't come back. That's been my plan for 15 years. Thomas wrote something down. The reluctant kind of writing. The kind where the hand knows what the head wants to say and disagrees. Mr. Smith, that's not a plan. That's a habit. James didn't answer. At the door, Thomas stopped. There's a party expressing interest in the parcel. If it proceeds to auction, I'm not permitted to say who. You don't have to. Thomas nodded slowly. No, I suppose I don't. Maya got off the bus at 3:35. The backpack hit the corner with a specific sound. James had cataloged this sound. Over years, the difference between a good day throw and a bad day throw, the particular impact weight of homework she didn't want to do versus homework she was worried about versus something that had happened at school that she was still carrying around in her chest. This was the third one. He didn't ask right away. You don't ask right away. You let a kid get into the room, get their feet under them. He went back under the hood of the Buick and let her climb up on the stool by the toolbox and spin it slow. 2 minutes. 3. Dad. How much money do we have? He came out from under the hood. Set the wrench down on the fender very carefully. Why? Because Bethany Cray said her dad is going to buy your shop. The wrench. He set it down very, very carefully. She said it at lunch. In front of everybody. Maya's chin was doing the same thing Donna Ellis's chin had done 3 hours ago, and it just about took James apart at the seams. She said her dad said we're going to have to move. She said she felt sorry for me. A pause. She said it in the voice. What did you do? Nothing. Maya, her hands twisted in her lap. I said my dad's shop is the best shop in this town, and everybody knows it. And what did she say? She said if it's the best shop, how come it looks like that? James sat down on the creeper. All the way down. I level with her, below her, so she was looking down at him instead of up. He'd learned that from Carol. Get under her, Cal, she used to say. Never talk down to her. Get under her, and let her stand on you. Come here, he said. Maya came. He took both her hands in his. I want to tell you something, and I want you to remember it. A man named Michael Johnson across that street has a sign that cost him $12,000. You know what's under that sign? What? James shrugged. Michael Johnson. That's it. That's all that's there. A sign is just paint and electricity, baby. It doesn't tell you one true thing about what's inside. But people look at the sign. Yeah. He squeezed her hands. They do. Most people never look at anything else. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said the thing that dropped him straight through the floor. Dad, your shop feels like a place where people are safe. He couldn't speak for a second. Yeah, he managed. It's safer than school. It's safer than the house sometimes, because in here you're always right there, and everybody who comes in is scared about something. She shrugged, like this was obvious, like she was explaining weather. And then they leave, and they're not scared anymore. That's what you do. You unscare people. James got up fast, walked to the parts washer, made a great production of looking for something in the drawer. Dad, are you crying? I'm the worst liar in America, he said, with his back still turned. So I'm not going to answer that. The rain started at 5:40. Not a gentle rain. Not the kind that shows up in movies behind meaningful conversations. This was a November rain, with a wind running through it cold enough to make your knuckles ache in about 90 seconds. The kind that comes in sideways off the fields and finds every gap in your jacket simultaneously. Maya did homework at the desk under the one lamp that worked. James closed out the register at 6:50. He counted it once. $41. He counted it twice. $41. He counted it a third time, because men do this. Men apply arithmetic to things they can't change and hope the numbers will have mercy, and got $41, at which point he put the bills back in the drawer and stood there, with his hands flat on the counter, and did the math. $84 in brake pads on Donna Ellis's car. $41 for the day. 24 days left on the clock. That's when it happened. The thing he'd never done. Not when the diagnosis came. Not at the funeral. Not the first night Maya woke up screaming for her mother, and James had sat on her floor until sunrise because he didn't know what else to do, and at least his body in the room seemed to mean something. Through all of it, he had not done this. He picked up the 3/4-inch wrench off the bench, and he threw it. Sidearm. Everything behind it. 15 years of every Sunday. Every $200 brake job he'd done, when the market rate was $640, every deadlight tube he couldn't replace, every conversation with a banker whose first question was, "Do you have a plan?" The wrench hit the concrete and cracked it, left a mark like an exclamation point, and skidded and clanged, and rang under the lift like a bell in a church where nobody was praying. Silence. Then, small and steady from the desk, Dad. He stood there, fist at his sides, shaking. He turned around. Maya was looking at him, with her pencil still in her hand. Not afraid of him, never that. Afraid for him, which was 1,000 times worse. He crossed the shop and got down on one knee in front of her stool. I'm sorry. It's okay. No, it isn't. That was, he rubbed his face. Left a grease mark. Didn't notice. That was me falling apart in front of you, and you're not going to see it again. Dad, Maya put her hand on his cheek. 8 years old. It's not weak to be mad. Mom used to throw stuff all the time. He laughed. It came out broken, but it came out. Your mother had an arm on her. I know. You told me. The plate. She threw a plate at the wall, over a parking ticket. And you kept the piece. Maya tapped his chest pocket, where there was, in fact, a chip of blue ceramic he'd carried for 11 years. Best day of my life, James said. She threw a plate at you. Best day of my life. This time the laugh came out whole. Maya laughed too. The shop settled back into something that felt like the shop again. James went and picked up the wrench, set it back on the bench, looked at the crack in the floor. Add it to the list, he said. What list? Things I'm going to fix when I'm rich. What's number one? He didn't even have to think about it. The sign. Number one has always been the sign. He was pulling the bay door down at 7:06. Almost didn't stop. He had the door at chest height, and his shoulders were done for the day, and there was a pack of chicken thighs thawing at home. He'd promised Maya he'd cook, but then the headlights came in wrong. Too fast on the turn, then too slow, then a hard stop that left the vehicle sitting half over the pothole at the lot's edge, and that told him everything he needed to know without knowing anything else at all. That wasn't a driver who was parking. That was a driver who wasn't seeing the lot, who was somewhere else entirely, while their hands moved the car. He pushed the door back up. "Stay inside," he told Maya. "Who is it?" "Don't know yet." It was a Range Rover. Black, recent, the big model, the kind of vehicle that cost $60,000 or $70,000 new and still looked like money at 5 years old. James's first thought, if he was honest with himself, was lost. Rich people sometimes turned off the interstate too early and ended up on Callaway Street looking confused and needing somewhere to turn around. It happened 4 or 5 times a year. His second thought arrived when he got close enough to see the front passenger tire. Not flat. Gone. Shredded down to the belts, rubber hanging off in strips, the rim driven on long enough that you could see the shine where the metal had been eating the road. "Sweetheart," James said out loud, to nobody. "How far did you drive on that?" Then he saw her, behind the wheel, both hands still at 10 and 2, staring straight through the windshield at nothing in particular. And she was crying, not the kind of crying you do when you want someone to notice. The real kind. The kind that happens when a person believes they're completely alone. Face wrecked, shoulders moving, mouth open and no sound coming out. A teenager. 17 maybe, 18 at the outside. James stopped about 8 feet from the door, and he did the calculation. The one a black man in a small American town does automatically, has done automatically his entire life, when it's dark and raining and there's a crying white teenage girl in a $70,000 car sitting in his parking lot. He did that math in about half a second, and the math was, be visible, be still, be exactly what you are, and let her see it. He stepped into the light from the bay, both hands out where they could be seen. Empty. He knocked on the glass with one knuckle. Twice. Soft. She jerked so hard her elbow hit the horn, and it blared one short, startled note, and she screamed. "It's okay." He said it, through the glass, without moving a single inch closer. "It's okay. I'm right here. I own this shop. My name is James. James Smith. That's my name on the building. I'm not going to come any closer than right here." She stared at him, through the glass, with both hands, over her mouth. "You hear me? I'm not going to move. You just breathe." She breathed. Sort of. "There you go." The window came down about 3 inches. Her voice was destroyed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll move. I'm parked in your..." "You're not parked. You stopped. There's a difference." Level. Easy. The same voice he'd used on Donna Ellis that morning. The same voice he used on Maya when something mattered. "Do you know your tire's gone?" She looked at it. Made a sound like something small and structural failing. "Oh my God. Did I do that? How long have I? How long have you been driving on it?" "I don't know." "How long, sweetheart?" It came out of her like a pressure valve releasing. "I don't know." I heard a bang. Somewhere back on the county road. A pause. I just kept driving. James looked down Callaway Street toward the dark. The county road was 11 miles of nothing. No lights, no shoulder. Ditches on both sides. A girl had driven 11 miles in the rain, with sparks coming off the front end and metal grinding into asphalt, and she had not stopped. Not because she couldn't, because somewhere in the last 11 miles, stopping had not occurred to her as a thing worth doing. James had been alive long enough to recognize what that meant. And it wasn't a car problem. "Okay," he said quietly. "Here's what's happening. That rim is damaged. That tire is finished. You are not driving that vehicle another block. Not one. Now you got somebody you can call." A laugh. Not a good one. "I have a phone. I have a very nice phone." The laugh was hollow all the way through. "I just don't have anyone to call." She looked at him through the 3-inch gap and said it in the flattest voice he'd ever heard from someone that age. "There's nobody who wants to hear from me right now." James stood in the rain and felt something in his chest turn over. "All right," he said. "All right. Lucky for you. You didn't call anybody. You landed in the right lot. Your shop is closed. I saw the sign." "Yeah." He looked up at the dead sign above the bay. "That sign doesn't work half the time anyway." "Never has. I've been meaning to fix it for 6 years." He nodded toward the bay. "I'm going to go get my jack and my breaker bar. That's it. That's all I'm getting. You can watch me the whole time. I'm going to stay in the light. Keep your doors locked if you want. I don't care. I'm not going to ask you to get out of that car." But that wool is coming off, and a spare is going on, and then you're going home. Her mouth trembled. I can't pay you right now. James had already turned toward the bay. He turned back. Did I ask you for money? She blinked. Did I say one word about money? He waited. Then don't put words in my mouth. I've got plenty of my own. For 1 second, one brief, clear second, something crossed her face. That wasn't misery. Pure surprise. The kind of surprise a person gets when they're handed something in a language they've never heard spoken. He worked in the rain for 22 minutes. She got out at minute 4. He didn't invite her. She just opened the door and stood under the overhang at the edge of the bay, arms wrapped around herself, wearing a coat that probably cost more than his truck, teeth chattering audibly from where he was kneeling. He didn't look up at her. He'd already understood that being looked at was the thing hurting her most right now. So he kept his eyes on the wheel and talked to the wheel. Lug nuts are seized. That's not your fault. That's whoever put them on last, with an impact gun and no torque wrench, which describes about 90% of the tire shops in this county. Nothing from her. You've got a full-size spare under the back. That's good news. A lot of these newer ones come with a donut the size of a dinner plate and send you on your way. Silence. Rain on the metal roof. Then, small, why are you talking to me? Because it's cold, and you're standing there, and it'd be rude not to. Silence. Most people ask me questions. Her voice had changed slightly. Not less broken. Just differently broken. About what? About who I am. James grunted, leaning his weight into the breaker bar. The nut broke loose, with a sound like a small argument ending. That's one, he said. 4 to go. Aren't you going to ask? Nope. Why not? Because you've been crying for about an hour. He moved to the next nut. And in my experience, when somebody's been crying for an hour, the last thing on God's green earth they want is a stranger asking them questions. He heard her breath hitch behind him. Besides, he added, I don't need to know who you are. I need to know what size wheel you've got. And I already know that. A long pause. Then something that might have been a laugh, if you were being generous about it. At minute 11 he went into the shop and came back with 2 things. He handed one to her, a bottle of water, room temperature from sitting on the shelf. She looked at it like it was a live animal. Take it. I'm not thirsty. You've been crying for an hour. You're dehydrated whether you feel it or not. And you've got to drive ahead of you. He went back to the wheel. Drink it before you get in the car. Sarah Rodriguez, though James didn't know that name yet, and wouldn't for another 14 hours, took the bottle of water in both hands and looked at it. And then her face came apart. Not like before. Worse. Like something load-bearing had failed. She sat down, just sat right down on the wet concrete lip of the bay in her expensive coat, and put the bottle in her lap and sobbed into her hands with her whole body. James set the breaker bar down quietly, sat down on the gravel, back against the tire he'd just pulled off, 8 feet away, and waited. He waited a long time. I'm sorry. She finally got it out. You keep saying that. I don't know why I'm a breath. It's just water. Yeah, James said. I know. She looked up at him, and something in the way he said it, the fact that he said I know instead of don't cry, or you're okay, or it's nothing, told her that he did know, that he wasn't confused, that he'd understood the situation from the moment she rolled the window down 3 inches, and he'd stayed anyway. You don't even know me, she whispered. Nope. Then why are you being nice to me? James looked at her, sitting on his wet concrete in her $1,000 coat, with 11 miles of ruined rim behind her, and nobody in the world she felt she could reach for. He thought about Maya inside doing long division under the lamp. He thought about the envelope in his back pocket. He thought about $41. Long time ago, he said, I was 23 years old, and I broke down on the interstate outside of town, with $11 in my pocket, and my wife 6 months pregnant in the passenger seat. Middle of the night. February. A man stopped. He paused. Old fella. Drove a wrecker. His name was Earl. He towed us 40 miles and fixed my water pump in his own driveway and wouldn't take a single dime. She was quiet. I asked him why, and he said, somebody did it for me in 71. You'll do it for somebody else. That's the whole system. James got up and went back to the wheel. That's it, he said. That's the whole answer. I'm not a good man, sweetheart. I'm just in the system. Across the street, in the yellow light of Cray Precision Automotive, Michael Johnson stood at the window, with Gary beside him. "Look at this," Michael said. "That's a Range Rover, Gary. $70,000 sitting in his gravel lot, and he is out there in the rain." He sipped his coffee. "I guarantee you he doesn't charge her $1." Gary watched James kneeling in the rain, watched the girl on the concrete, with the water bottle in her lap. Something moved across Gary's face, something he didn't have a name for yet, something that would stay with him. "I'm not taking that bet," Gary said quietly. "Why not?" "Because I'd lose." At minute 22, James torqued the last nut and stood up. His knees screamed. He ignored them. "You're done." She was on her feet, wallet out, a card in her hand, black, not plastic, the kind that had actual weight to it. "Please, just take whatever. Take all of it." "I don't." "Put it away." "You don't understand." "I have to." "Put it away." "Why?" Not a question. Torn out of her. At full volume in an empty parking lot in the rain. "Why won't you take it?" "Everybody takes it. Everybody in my entire life takes it. That's what it's for. That's the only thing I'm for." She stopped, both hands over her mouth, horrified at what had come out. Rain. Just rain, and the distant sound of the highway, and James standing there soaked, through with a wrench in his hand and grease to his elbows. "Somebody helped me once, when I needed it," he said quietly. "I'm passing it forward. That's all this is. It's not charity. It's not a favor. You don't owe me anything." He waited until she looked at him. "And it has got not one single thing to do with your money. I don't want it. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You could be the richest girl in America, or you could be broke, as I am. Same tire. Same rain. Same price." She stared at him. "Now go home. Go slow. That spare is fine, but don't push it past 60. She got in the car, sat there a moment. Then the window came down all the way, and she looked out at him, and her face had changed. Changed in a way he would find himself thinking about for a long time afterward. "Nobody's ever done that," she said. "Done what?" "Given me something." She drove out, onto Callaway Street, and turned left toward the highway, and was gone. James stood in his lot in the rain, holding a wrench. $41 in the register. A crack in his floor. 24 days. He went inside and rolled the bay door down. Maya had watched the whole thing, through the window. She hadn't said a word about it. Just looked at her father, when he came back in, and her face was doing something he couldn't quite read. "What?" he said. She shook her head. "Nothing." A pause. "Nothing, Dad." He put her to bed at 9:40 and stood in the doorway the way he did every night. Light off. Just standing there making sure she was really there, and not just something he'd imagined. "Dad, go to sleep." "Who was she?" Maya said. "Just somebody with a flat tire." She was crying. "Yeah. Is she okay?" James thought about that. Thought about the flinch, when she'd raised her voice, like she expected something to follow it. Thought about nobody wants to hear from me right now. Thought about 11 miles of bare rim in the rain without stopping. "I don't know, baby," he said honestly. "I hope so." A quiet beat. "You unscared her, though." Maya pulled the blanket up. "I could see it from the window. I changed a tire." "Dad." He turned off her light. He didn't sleep. He lay in the cold, with the envelope on the nightstand, and did the arithmetic he'd been doing for 6 days. $18,240, divided by 24 days, divided by 41. Every road it took him down ended in the same place. Michael Johnson standing in this shop, with a clipboard, and Maya in a different school in a different town, telling kids she didn't know, yet that her dad used to have a garage. At 6:12 the next morning, while he was standing at the counter cracking 2 eggs into a pan, his phone lit up. Unknown number. He almost let it go. Then he picked it up. "Is this James Smith?" A woman's voice. Calm in a specific way, the controlled calm of someone who had already decided something before dialing. "Speaking. Do you own the repair shop on Callaway Street?" "I do." He turned the burner down. "Ma'am, if this is about a warranty, it isn't. If it's about a bill, it isn't one of those either." A pause. He heard something on her end. Paper. A pen being set down with intention. "Mr. Smith. My name is Patricia Johnson." James didn't say anything. He didn't say anything, because the eggs were burning, and he had stopped seeing them, because that name had come, through the phone, and landed in his kitchen like a piece of furniture nobody had ordered. Everybody in this county knew that name. It was on the side of two buildings downtown. It was on the trucks that ran the interstate at 4 in the morning. It was on a plaque in the hospital where Carol had died, big brass letters mounted in the lobby, Johnson Family Wing. And he had walked past it every single day for 9 weeks holding his wife's hand and had never once thought of it as belonging to an actual person. Mr. Smith, you went quiet. I'm aware of that, ma'am. You know the name. Everybody knows the name. He paused. That's kind of the point of it, isn't it? Something happened on the other end of the line. Something that might have been a breath, that almost became a laugh, but didn't quite get there. My daughter came home last night, Patricia Johnson said, and James Smith, standing in a cold kitchen at 6:12 in the morning, with a foreclosure notice on the table and $41 in a register across the street, said the only thing that came into his head. Is she okay? The silence on the phone lasted long enough that James checked the screen to see if she'd hung up. She hadn't. Mr. Smith. Patricia Johnson's voice came back measured, careful in the way of someone choosing words from a very specific inventory. I have been on this phone since 5:30 this morning. I've spoken to my head of security, my attorney, and the man who manages my family office. A beat. Every single one of them asked me the same first question. James waited. What does he want? Not a question the way she said it. A statement about the world. About how the world had always worked for a woman, with her name on the side of buildings. I want to know if she's okay, James said. Another silence. Longer than the first. He heard something on her end, a chair moving. Something being set down deliberately. She's asleep. Patricia's voice had shifted. Just slightly. The controlled calm still there, but something underneath it moving. She got home at 8:40. She came into my office, which she does not do. She has not voluntarily walked into my office in. She stopped. Started over. She stood in the doorway, and she told me a man in a garage fixed her tire in the rain and wouldn't take her money and gave her a bottle of water and didn't ask her name. And then she started crying, and she couldn't stop, and I couldn't get another word out of her, and she went upstairs. James looked at the burning eggs, decided they were beyond saving. That's not an ordinary thing for her, Patricia said. Crying in front of me. She cried in front of me, James said. And I'm a stranger with dirty hands. I wouldn't take it personally if I were you. Sometimes it's easier with a stranger. There's no bill at the end of it. He heard her breathe out. Slow. Deliberate. You're not what I expected. You had a picture in your head. I had 3 pages in my head. My security team had a file on you by 5:50. James moved the pan off the burner. Would you like to know what's in it? Not particularly. James Robert Smith, 38, widower, 1 daughter, 8 years old, 15 years at the same address, 211 verified customer reviews, average 4.9 stars, no lawsuits, no complaints filed with the state licensing board, no liens, a pause. Brief, precise, except one, filed 19 days ago by First Cumberland Bank on the property itself, $18,240. The pan hissed when he set it in the sink. You had somebody look me up before 6 in the morning. Yes. Why? Because a man who does something for nothing, Patricia Johnson said, is either the best person you'll meet all year or the most expensive one. James leaned on the counter. Let that sit for a moment. Then, that's a hell of a way to live, ma'am. It's kept me alive. No. He said it flat. Not mean. Just true. It's kept you rich. Those aren't the same thing. The longest silence yet. Now, James straightened up. If you don't mind, I've got a daughter to get to a bus stop. So did you call to thank me, or did you call to check me out? Because you can only do one before you hang up. He heard it then, one syllable of genuine laughter. Sharp, surprised, the kind that gets past a guard that hasn't been gotten past in a long time. I called, Patricia Johnson said, to ask if you take appointments. James blinked at the counter. Appointments. I have a vehicle I'd like looked at. Ma'am, you have a fleet. You have an entire building full of people whose job is. I do. So what do I need you for? A pause. That, Mr. Smith, is exactly the question I intend to answer. 9 o'clock. Is that a problem? He should have said yes. Any reasonable man would have said yes. Any man who wasn't standing in a cold kitchen at 6:12 in the morning, With an eviction notice on his table and 2 ruined eggs in his sink, would have slowed down and thought about this very carefully. 9's fine. And bring the registration. I don't work on a car I can't confirm belongs to whoever's standing in front of me. A pause that had a different texture than the others. You're going to ask me for a registration. I ask everybody. Mr. Smith. That's how it works down here. And he hung up on Patricia Johnson. He stood there for about 4 seconds, then said out loud to an empty kitchen, "You absolute idiot." Who was that? Maya was on the bottom step in her school clothes. Nobody. You're the worst liar in America. So I've been told. He went to crack 2 more eggs. Decided to take a breath first. It was a customer. You yelled at a customer. I did not yell. I firmly conversed. Dad. Maya climbed onto the stool. You told a customer to bring their registration. You never asked for registration. Miss Donna doesn't even have hers. She keeps it in a junk drawer since 2011. Eat your eggs when they're ready. Who was it? James set the pan on the burner and looked at his daughter. Looked at her for a moment the way you look at someone when you're trying to decide how much truth the moment can hold. You remember the girl last night? The one you watched from the window? Maya's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. That was her mother. Silence. Is she mad? And that, the fact that his 8-year-old daughter's first instinct, upon hearing that a woman named Patricia Johnson had called her father, was is she mad, sent something cold through James that had nothing at all to do with the broken furnace. No, baby, he said. She's not mad. Then what does she want? James looked out the window at the gray morning over the roofline. That, he said, is the exact right question. He got to the shop at 6:10 and did something he had not done in 6 years. He cleaned it. Not the wipe down he did every Friday. A clean. He swept the bay twice. Rolled the parts washer back against the wall where it didn't look abandoned. Took every wrench out of the top drawer and laid them back in by size. They were already by size. Had been for 15 years, but he did it anyway, with his hands moving faster than his brain. He wiped the counter. Wiped it again. Found a can of degreaser and got down on his knees and went at the crack in the concrete, the one from last night, the one the wrench had made, like he could scrub the whole thing out of existence if he worked at it hard enough. At 7:40, he caught himself standing in the middle of his own shop looking at it the way a stranger would look at it. Measuring it, seeing it through someone else's eyes. He stopped. Put the rag down. No, he said out loud, because he knew exactly what he was doing. He'd watched his own father do the same thing. Had watched Robert Smith put on his good shirt to go ask for a loan he'd already earned 3 times over. Watched him practice his voice in the truck on the way there. Watched a grown man make himself smaller, quieter, less, carefully unthreatening, so a man, with money behind a desk, wouldn't be startled by the full size of him. Robert Smith had died at 62, still owing that bank money, and still saying yes sir to men who called him by his first name, while he called them Mr. Whoever. James picked up the rag and threw it back on the bench where it lived. Dragged the parts washer back to where it had been. Looked at the crack in the floor. Looked at it for a moment. You stay right there, he told it. That's how Michael Johnson found him at 8:50, arms crossed, staring at a crack in his own concrete like it owed him a specific amount of money. James. Michael had his coffee. Of course he had his coffee. You feeling all right? Never better. Gary was 2 steps behind, with his hands in his pockets. Michael looked around the shop slowly. Saw you out in the rain last night. Had to be 20 minutes. 22. I looked at the clock a couple of times. A grin. That Range Rover in your lot. Tell me you charged her. Tell me you at least got something. James said nothing. James. The grin faded into something that wanted to be genuine and almost was. I genuinely want to understand you. You've got 24 days. 23. You've got 23 days. A rich girl parks in your lot, with money falling out of her pockets, and you turn it down. Michael spread his hands. Explain that to me. Like I'm 5. She was crying, Michael. A pause. So. James shrugged. That's the explanation. Michael shook his head. That's not an explanation. That's a bumper sticker. And then the light in the bay changed. Not off. Blocked. Something came off Callaway Street and swung into the gravel, and the sign light from Cray Precision got cut across the whole floor of the bay. A Mercedes. Black. Low. quiet, the kind of car that didn't announce itself because it didn't have to. And behind it a second car. And behind that a third. Gary said, Michael turned around, with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth, and left it there, 6 inches from his face, for what felt to Gary like a full minute. The first man out of the lead car was about 50 and built like something load-bearing. He did not look at Michael, did not look at James. He looked at everything else, the roofline, the alley behind the building, the second bay, the exits, in about 4 seconds. Then he stood by the rear door. Patricia Johnson got out of the car. She was smaller than James had expected. That was his first thought, and he'd feel mildly foolish about it later. 51, maybe 52. Gray wool coat. No visible jewelry except a wedding ring on a hand that hadn't had a husband on the other end of it in over a decade. Hair pulled back, tired around the eyes in a way that no amount of money had ever cured for anyone. She looked at the building. She looked at the faded sign, S-M-T-A-T-I-R-E, and she looked at it long enough that James felt it somewhere in his stomach. Then she walked into his shop. Mr. Smith. Ma'am. She placed a folded document on his counter, slid it across. My registration. James picked it up. Read it. Front and back. Took his time. He could feel Michael Johnson behind him like a heat source. That's you, James said. That's me. All right then. He handed it back. And Patricia Johnson's mouth did something at the corner that wasn't quite a smile, but was related to one. Michael stepped forward. Voice already shifting, the street corner version replaced in real time by something smoother, something that had been practiced. Mrs. Johnson. Michael Johnson. No relation. He laughed at his own joke. Alone. Cray Precision Automotive, right across the street. 9 bays, factory certified, full diagnostic suite. If you're looking for a service provider in this area, I want you to know we're equipped for. Mr. Cray. Patricia didn't look at him. How much do you charge for a brake job? Michael blinked. That depends on the vehicle. A 2009 Buick LaCrosse. Rear brakes. The owner is a 74-year-old woman on a fixed income who drives to a dialysis appointment twice a week. The shop went very quiet. Michael's face moved through several things. That'd be in the neighborhood of 600. And what does he charge? She didn't point at James. Didn't need to. Michael's coffee cup finally came down. He does it for 200, she said. Because he's... Michael stopped. Finish it. Not loud. Not mean. Just a woman who had sat across from 400 men exactly like Michael Johnson and had never once allowed one of them to leave a sentence half-constructed. You started it. And Michael Johnson, standing in the shop he'd spent 9 years considering beneath him, in front of a woman whose company ran half the logistics contracts in the state, said it in a voice like a man reading something he'd written about himself and didn't recognize, because he's soft. Said Patricia Johnson, and she turned her back on him. Michael stood there for a moment, then walked out. Gary lingered at the door, and just before he left, he caught James's eye. And James would swear to this later. Gary gave him the smallest nod one human being has ever given another. Then he was gone. Patricia didn't watch them leave. I've been in this building 90 seconds, she said, and I already understand it better than my security team did in 3 hours. You didn't have to do that, James said. I didn't do it for you. Then who? She looked at him. Myself. I've had a bad year, Mr. Smith. That was the most enjoyment I've had in 6 months. She brought a vehicle for him to look at. It was in the third car, and when they brought it out, James stopped walking and looked at it and kept looking. A 1994 Chevrolet C1500, half-ton, red that had faded to something closer to the color of old clay. Manual windows. A dent in the driver's door shaped roughly like a knee. He walked around it twice before he said a word. This isn't your truck. It's registered to me. Ma'am. He crouched at the rear wheel. That's not what I said. You didn't buy this truck. Nobody bought this truck. This truck got kept. He stood up. 61,000 original miles, and 40 of them are the same road driven, over and over. Look at the wear pattern on this rear tire versus that one. Somebody drove the same 11 miles twice a day for 20 years. Patricia said nothing. Whose was it? Does it matter? It matters to how I fix it. She looked at the truck for a long time. Long enough that the man, who looked like a filing cabinet, shifted his weight by the door. My father's. Her voice had gone flat in the way voices go flat when they're working very hard. He hauled gravel. Had a pit outside of town. 11 employees most years. Some years 9. A pause. He drove that truck to that pit every single day from 1994 until 2003. And then he had a stroke in the cab in a Hardee's parking lot and sat there for 40 minutes before anyone found him. Because he'd told everyone he was fine and no one had ever argued with him about anything. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a difficult man. She put her hand flat on the fender. The way you touch something you weren't sure was still real. I've had it in climate-controlled storage since he died. My people service it twice a year. Start it, change the oil, write me a report. And it has never run right since he passed. Not one day. Not once. How much have you spent? She stopped. I'm embarrassed to say. Tell me anyway. Somewhere over $90,000. James laughed. Out loud. Before he could stop it. Then caught himself. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's a reasonable response. 90,000 on a truck worth maybe 4. Yes. To do what? Patricia Johnson looked at the truck for a long moment, and something came up in her face, something James recognized from 1,000 mirrors across 11 years. To make it right, she said quietly. He walked to the driver's door, opened it. The hinge groaned, a specific groan, the kind a door makes when it's been opened a particular way 10,000 times and has settled into that opening like a habit. He stood there a moment just listening to it. Get in, he said. I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to listen to it. Then I'll tell you what's wrong. Patricia Johnson, in a coat that probably cost more than the furnace James couldn't afford to fix, climbed into a rusted 1994 Chevrolet and turned the key. It caught on the second crank. Idled. James stood 4 feet away, with his arms folded and his eyes closed. The engine ran. He listened for 12 seconds. Then, shut it off. She did. Well, she said. Nothing's wrong with it. Excuse me. Not one thing. James unfolded his arms. That's the cleanest small block I've heard in 10 years. Whoever did that rebuild did it right. I'd be lying to you if I said different, and I don't lie to people about their vehicles. Her hands were still on the wheel. Then why doesn't it sound right? And her voice cracked, just split open in the middle of a sentence in front of a stranger in a cinder block garage on Callaway Street. Everyone tells me it's fine. I sit in it, and it's not fine. I've started to think. The motor mounts, James said. She went still. They pulled that engine to rebuild it. Whoever put it back and used new mounts, because that's what you do. New mounts are stiff. They transmit vibration straight up through the frame. He leaned against the door. Your father's truck had 30-year-old mounts in it. Half-rotted. Soft as a wet sponge. They absorbed everything. So when you sit in that seat, you're feeling a different truck. Same engine. Same everything. But it doesn't shake the way it shook when you were a kid sitting next to him. Patricia Johnson did not move. That's the whole $90,000, James said. Nobody told you, because every shop you took it to was measuring it. And there's no gauge for that. She sat in the truck. She sat in it for a long time. Then she said, in a voice about the size of a coin, the radio knob used to fall off. Yes, ma'am. The vibration would shake it loose. He'd be talking, and his hand would her own hand move to the dashboard. He'd catch it without looking. Just reach out and screw it back on mid-sentence. Yes, ma'am. Can you fix it? I can put the original spec mounts in. Take me a day. Parts run about $110. He let a moment pass. But I need you to hear what I'm about to say, because it's the important part. Go ahead. It won't be him. The shop was very quiet. It'll shake like it shook. The knob will fall off. You'll drive out of here, and you'll get maybe 2 miles down the road, and for about 10 seconds you're going to think he's in the passenger seat. And then you're going to remember he isn't. James's throat worked. And that's something you can't undo once you do it. So think before you tell me yes. Patricia looked up at him. How do you know that? Know what? That it gets worse before it gets better. How do you know that specific thing? James stood in his own garage, with the sound of rain on the metal roof above him. Because I kept my wife's car for 2 years after she passed, he said. Kept it running perfect. Started it every Sunday. And one Sunday I got in it, and it smelled like her, and I sat in my own driveway, and couldn't get out for 2 hours. My daughter was 4 years old. She came and knocked on the glass. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I sold it that August. Best $100 I ever lost. Patricia Johnson's eyes were shining. Put the mounts in, she said. Ma'am. Put the mounts in, Mr. Smith. He had the truck in the air by 11. She didn't leave. That was the thing that stayed with him. She sent 2 of the 3 cars away, told the filing cabinet to wait outside. And she took off her coat, actually took it off, a coat that James would later learn cost somewhere around $4,000, and hung it on a nail he'd driven into the wall in 2011. And she sat on the stool by the toolbox. Maya's stool, and she watched him work. She didn't talk much at first. Then she did. She said something else last night. Patricia said around noon, before she went upstairs. I've been turning it over since. James kept his eyes on the mount bolt. She said you didn't want anything from her. And I said, well, that's good, sweetheart. And she looked at me. Patricia turned the stool slowly. She said, do you know how weird that is? That's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. James didn't say anything. You're not going to say anything. I'm deciding whether you want me to make you feel better or tell you the truth. A pause. The truth. All right. He set the wrench down, came out from under the truck, stood up and looked at her. She drove 11 miles on a bare rim. You know that. I know, ma'am. I don't think you do. 11 miles. Sparks off the front end. Noise like a table saw. And she didn't stop. He let that sit in the air between them. You know how long 11 miles takes at 40 miles an hour? That's 16 minutes. 16 straight minutes, with the front end coming apart under her, and she didn't notice. Or she noticed and didn't care. I've been turning those 2 options over since 10 o'clock last night, and I don't like either one. And I don't have a third. Patricia Johnson's face did not move. Not a single muscle. James understood, watching her, that this was a skill she had built over decades and that it was currently holding up something very heavy. She has a therapist, Patricia said. Okay. A very good one. Okay. She has. Patricia stopped. Her hand went up over her mouth, and from behind it, in a voice stripped of everything that usually surrounded it, she has a therapist and a driver and a nutritionist and a college counselor, and she does not have anyone to call. The shop was quiet enough to hear the compressor ticking as it cooled. She told you that, Patricia said. A stranger. You're her mother, James said. You're the last one she'd tell. You're the one it would hurt the most. He said it simply, not harshly, just true. Patricia Johnson, who ran a company with 4,000 employees and her father's name on the side of 2 buildings, put her face in her hands in a garage on Callaway Street. James got a bottle of water, set it on the toolbox next to her, without a word, went back under the truck, gave her the room she needed, because he'd learned a long time ago that the kindest thing you can do for a person coming apart is hand them something to hold and stop looking at them. After a while she said, "Thick, this is what you did to her." "Yes, ma'am. It works. It's just water," James said. "No. Quiet. Definite. It isn't." At 2:20 he dropped the truck off the lift, and Patricia was standing before it touched the ground. "You start it," she said. "I want to hear it from out here first." "I'm not," she swallowed. "I'm not ready to be inside it yet." So James Smith got into a dead man's truck and turned the key. It caught on the second crank, and it shook the whole cab. A low, rolling, beautiful lope that came up through the floor and into the seat and rattled the glass in the door and moved everything that wasn't bolted down. And on the dashboard, the radio knob shivered on its post. Vibrated to the edge. Dropped. James caught it. Right hand. Off the seat. Without looking. The way you catch something you've caught 1,000 times. Except he had never caught it once in his life. He looked up. Patricia Johnson was standing in the doorway of his shop, with her hand pressed over her mouth and something in her face that had been held together for 11 years coming undone in the presence of a stranger in a cinder block building on a dead-end street. He shut the engine off, got out, walked to her, and put the knob in her palm and folded her fingers around it. She stood there and shook harder than the truck had. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she wasn't alone in it and far enough that she still had her dignity. He'd learned in 15 years that this was the exact distance people needed, and that there was no instrument that measured it. For minutes. Then she straightened, wiped her face with the back of her wrist like a kid, laughed once, short, wet, furious at herself. "Well," she said. "Damn you. Yes, ma'am. You told me it would be worse. I did. You were right. I usually am about that particular thing." She looked at the knob in her palm, closed her fingers around it again. "What do I owe you?" 110 for the mounts. No labor. Mr. Smith, there's no labor. And I'd take it kindly if you didn't fight me on it, because I had this exact fight with your daughter 11 hours ago, and I won, and I'd like to keep my streak intact. Patricia looked at him for a long moment. Then the shape of the room changed. "There's a lien on this building," she said. James's face closed. $18,240. 23 days. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave now." "Mr. Smith, I mean it." His voice didn't rise. It went lower, which was worse. "You go get out your checkbook in my shop, and I swear, before God, I will put your father's truck back on the lift, pull those mounts out, and hand you the keys. We'll call it even. I am not writing you a check." James stopped. Patricia took a step toward him. "I am not writing you a check, because if I write you a check today, do you know what happens? You keep this building for 11 months. Then you're back here, because the check doesn't fix the problem. The problem isn't $18,000. The problem is that you charge $200 for a $600 job, and you've built a business model that only survives if you never sleep and never get sick and nothing ever goes wrong." She held his gaze. "A check just delays it, and you'd resent me for the rest of your life. And you'd be right too." James said nothing. "So I'm not writing a check," Patricia said. "I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think before you answer, because I intend to hold you to whatever you say." He waited. "How many commercial vehicles can you service in a week? If you had the space, the equipment, a second man, a third man, how many?" James stared at her. "That's a straightforward question, Mr. Smith." "Ma'am, what are you asking me?" "I have 406 vehicles in this state." Patricia Johnson said it the way you say a number you've lived with long enough that it stopped being abstract. "Vans, box trucks, service pickups. They're currently maintained under a national contract. That costs me $2.4 million a year. I have 300 pages of complaints about that contract. I have been trying to get out of it for 18 months. She reached into her coat pocket. "So I'm not going to give you $18,000, Mr. Smith. I've never done that for anyone, and I'm not starting today." "Then what?" "I'm going to ask you to bid on the contract." Behind her, through 9 bright bays of glass across the street, Michael Johnson stood at his window watching a woman who'd made him finish his own sentence stand in James Smith's shop for the 4th consecutive hour. $2.4 million a year. Open bid. 14 days. 6 firms, national, regional, and one bay garage on Callaway Street. If that garage can produce a proposal, that doesn't embarrass either of us. James laughed. It came out genuine, and it wasn't nice. "Ma'am, I've got one lift. I have one lift, one man, and 23 days before the bank takes the building. That lift is bolted too. You understand what you're doing right now? You're standing in a shop that's going under and telling a drowning man to enter a swimming race." "Yes, that's cruel." "It might be." Patricia picked up her coat from the nail. "Mr. Smith, let me say something my legal team would not allow me to say in front of witnesses. If I hand you this contract, every person in that company will know you were given it, and they will spend 2 years waiting for you to fail so they can say they were right. But if you earn it in a room with 5 other firms and my CFO, who will despise you on sight, nobody can say a word. Ever. And the bank. 23 days, ma'am, is not my business." She met him level. "I know what that sounds like. I mean it exactly the way it sounds. The minute I make your bank problem my problem, you become my employee. I have 4,000 of those. I don't want another one. I want a vendor. A vendor is a man who can look me in the face and tell me no." She paused at the door. "My father borrowed $19,000 in 1979 from a bank that didn't want to give it to him. I've thought about that number my entire life. It wasn't a lot of money. It was everything. And nobody handed it to him either." James stood in the middle of his shop. "Why did you really come here?" he said. She stopped. You could have called. You could have sent someone. Why'd you actually come? Patricia Johnson stood in the doorway of a cinder-block garage with her dead father's radio knob in her coat pocket and the ghost of his engine still in her ears. My daughter came home last night, she said, and looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was 6 years old, for about 4 seconds, and I would burn every building with my name on it to get 4 more. Then she left. James stood there for a full minute after the cars pulled out. Then he walked to his counter and picked up his spiral notebook, the one he used for work orders, for parts lists, for the phone numbers of suppliers, who sometimes gave him 30 extra days if he called before noon, and he opened it to a clean page. He looked at the blank page. He wrote at the top, in block letters, the way his father had taught him to write a work order, so there was no confusion about what was being done to whose vehicle bid. He looked at that for a moment. Then underneath it, for 106 vehicles. He looked at that. Then he sat down on Maya's stool and put both hands over his face and said out loud to an empty shop, "I don't know how to do this." At 3:35, Maya came through the door and threw her backpack and stopped, because her father was sitting on her stool with a notebook, which had never happened, not one time in her entire memory. "Dad, hey baby, why are you sitting down?" "Thinking." "You don't think sitting down. You think under a car." "Today I'm thinking sitting down." He patted the workbench. "Come here. I want to ask you something, and I need a real answer. Not a nice one." She hopped up. "You know how you said this shop feels safe?" "Yeah. If it got bigger, say 6 bays, a few more guys working, trucks coming in and out all day, would it still feel like that? Would you still come here after school?" Maya frowned at him. "How much bigger?" "A lot bigger." She thought about it. Seriously, the way she thought about things that mattered. "It's not the building, Dad. It's you." She said it like she was explaining something he should have already known. "Miss Donna doesn't come here for the building. Have you seen the building?" James laughed so hard, he had to put the notebook down. He didn't sleep that night either, but it was a different kind of not sleeping. At 11, he was at the kitchen table with the notebook and a calculator from 2006 that still worked if you held the battery compartment closed with your thumb. At 1 in the morning, he was still there. At 2, he got up and stood in Maya's doorway for a while, and then went back and sat down. By 4 in the morning, he had numbers. 406 vehicles. Preventive maintenance every 90 days, for visits a year, 1,624 service events. 90 minutes average per vehicle, some more, some less, brakes and tires on top. He did it 3 times, and got 3 slightly different answers, and did it a 4th time, slowly, out loud. The way you check torque on something that matters. 14,600 labor hours per year. He stared at that number until it went soft at the edges. Then he wrote under it, "I have 1 lift and 2 hands." Under that, need 6 bays, 5 techs, service software, insurance I can't afford. A building the bank takes in 22 days. He looked at the column without a total. Then wrote, because he was his father's son, and Robert Smith had raised him to never leave an estimate, without a bottom line, start anyway. At 6:10 he opened the shop. At 6:40 he called Robert Williams. Robert picked up on the 4th ring, voice low, whispering, "Mr. Smith." "Robert, you at work?" "In the parking lot. I've got like 4 minutes." "How much does Michael pay you?" Silence. Then, 18 an hour. "How many hours?" "Whatever he needs. Sometimes 60. He pay overtime?" Longer silence. He started calling it salary in April. James closed his eyes. "Come see me." "Not today, not where he can see you." "Saturday. My house, 7 in the morning. I'll make breakfast." "Mr. Smith, don't say yes right now. Don't say anything right now. Go inside. Think about it. 2 days." He hung up, then made 40 more calls over 3 days. And this is the part nobody ever tells you about. Because it isn't dramatic. It's just a man in a cold garage being told no. The equipment company wanted 40% down on new lifts. The software company wanted a 2-year contract and a business credit score James did not have. The insurance broker laughed, actually laughed, out loud, into the phone, and said, "Commercial fleet liability, sir, with your current revenue profile, you'd need a bond first." Do you know what a bond is? I know what a bond is. Then you know why. He called Thomas Rodriguez at the bank. Mr. Smith. Thomas's voice had the sound of someone who had been hoping this call wouldn't come and had known it would. I want to help you. I genuinely do. I need 30 more days. I can't authorize 30 days. Thomas, I have a shot at a $2.4 million contract. A silence. James could hear the man's entire professional identity wrestling with itself. Do you have that in writing? No. A letter of intent? No. Is there anything at all I could put in a file? I have a woman's word. Whose? Patricia Johnson. The silence that followed was different from all the others. Longer. More careful. Mr. Smith. Thomas's voice came back very quiet. I want to be delicate here. Don't be. If I take that upstairs, they're going to think he stopped. Say it. They're going to think you're not well, Thomas said. A man 20 days from foreclosure calls and says a billionaire is going to save him. You understand how that sounds from this side of the desk. Yeah, James said. I do. A pause. I'm sorry. I know you are, Gordon. That's what makes it worse. He hung up. Michael Johnson found out on a Friday. He came across the street at 4 in the afternoon without his coffee, and that was how James knew. You're bidding. Michael's voice had a different quality, not the social version. Something underneath it. You're bidding on the Johnson fleet. James kept his head under the hood. With one lift. Michael's voice cracked off the cinder block. James, are you out of your mind? I have 9 bays. I have a scanner, a bond, and I've been trying to get a piece of that fleet for 4 years. For years. I sent a proposal in 2022. They didn't send a rejection. They just, nothing. James rolled out from under the hood. Michael was looking at him. And then something happened that James genuinely had not anticipated. Michael's face did a thing it had never done in 9 years. Just for a second. The surface of it, the performance of it, came apart in the middle. What was underneath wasn't mean. It was scared. You know what I've got in that building? Michael said quietly. $1,000,001. That's what I've put in. And it's not mine. None of it's mine. I owe every nickel. 9 bays, and I need 40 cars a week through them just to make the note. And there are 20 cars a week in this town. There have always been 20. And I've been fighting you for those 20 for 9 years. James said nothing. I built that building facing yours. Michael laughed. And it was an awful sound, nothing like the street filling one. You know why I put the windows on your side? Everybody thinks it was to look down at you. He shook his head. It was so I could watch you. Because I could not figure out how a man, with one lift and no working sign, was taking cars off my lot. I genuinely could not figure it out. Because I don't have your note, James said. Don't. Michael, I charge $200 because I don't owe anybody. I've got a paid-off building and a lift from 1994, and I've never taken a vacation. That's the whole trick. Except there's no trick. I can charge $200 because I don't owe the bank until now. And in 22 days, I'm going to be gone. And you're going to have your 20 cars. And you know what? James held his gaze. You're not going to make the note anyway, because the 20 cars was never the actual problem. Michael's hands opened and closed at his sides. They don't come to me for the price, James said. They come because, when Donna Ellis walks into your waiting room, you look at her hip. You look at her hip and her coin purse, and you do the math on what she can be talked into spending. And she feels that. Every single person you've ever talked to in that building has felt that. That's your problem. You built 9 bays and put a man inside them who can't stop counting. Michael stared at him for a long moment. You're going to lose the bid, he said. Flat. Quiet. The business voice. And then you're going to lose the building. And I am going to buy this lot at auction for 40 cents on the dollar. And I am going to put a parking lot here. And I want you to know I will think about this conversation the entire time. I know you will, James said. That's your other problem. Michael walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame, and said the thing, in a voice so different from all the others, so flat and calm, and absent of anything performative, that it landed like something physical. Your girl rides the bus with mine. James came off the fender. What did you say? Just making conversation. Both hands up, palms out, smiling. I didn't say a thing, James. Have a good weekend. Robert Williams showed up Saturday at 7. Too thin jacket for the weather. Wouldn't look up from the porch steps. Come in. It's 28 degrees. He came in. Maya put a plate in front of him without being asked. And Robert Williams looked at that plate the way a man looks at something he hasn't seen in a long time and had stopped expecting. James let him eat before he said anything. Robert, how long have you been at Cray? 6 years. You're good. I'm all right. That's not what I asked. Robert put his fork down. I'm the best tech in that building. It came out fast, like it had been sitting just behind his teeth for 6 years straight. I'm the only one who reads the service bulletins. I fix Dale's work twice a week, and Michael doesn't know because I don't tell him. Because Dale's got a kid. Then why are you making $18 an hour on a fake salary? Robert didn't answer right away. Because he hired me when nobody else would. Quiet, like something he'd said to himself many times. I've got a record. I was 20. It was stupid. It doesn't matter what it was. It was stupid, and I did 9 months, and I applied at 11 shops, and Michael was the only one who called back. He looked up. His eyes were wet and furious, which is a specific combination. And he's never let me forget it. He doesn't say it out loud anymore. He doesn't have to. He just looks at me a certain way. And every time I think about saying something, I hear him. Robert, who else is going to have you? The kitchen was quiet. 6 days a week, Robert said. 60 hours. He calls it salary. And he stopped. The worst part, Mr. Smith, is he's right. Who else is going to have me? James looked at him for a long moment. Me, he said. Robert laughed. The helpless kind. You're going under. Probably. Everybody in town knows you're going under. Yep. Then what are you offering me? James got up, got the spiral notebook from the counter, set it on the table, and turned it to face Robert. 406 vehicles. 14,000 labor hours. 1 garage. 22 days. Robert looked at it. What is this? That's what I'm offering you. If I win something, I probably won't win. $24 an hour. Time and a half after 40. Every hour on a time card. No salary. No games. No looking at you a certain way. And Robert, James leaned forward. Nobody in my building signs a document on a vehicle they didn't touch. Not once. Not ever. That's the only rule. There's one rule, and that's it. Robert stared at the notebook. You don't have the contract. No. You don't have the building past the 22nd. No. You don't have anything. I've got 22 days and a spiral notebook, and I am asking you to walk away from a job to come work for a man who might be out of business before Christmas. I know what I'm asking. I'd tell Maya not to do it. Robert sat there. Why me? Because you wouldn't take Michael's bet. James said it simply. Thursday night, in the rain, he was standing at that window ready to bet $20 I wouldn't charge that girl. And you wouldn't take it. I could see you both, from the lot, clear as anything. You had your hands in your pockets, and you were looking at me like it was making you sick. A man who won't take a sure $20 because the bet is ugly. James shrugged. That's the whole interview. That's everything I need to know about anybody. Robert put his face in his hands. He'll ruin me, he said. You know that. He'll call every shop in 3 counties. He'll tell them about the record. Yeah, he will. So if you go under, I've got nothing. That's right. Robert laughed again, quieter this time. Mr. Smith, that is legitimately the worst offer anyone has ever made me. It's the only honest one I've got. Robert Williams sat at that kitchen table for 30 seconds. Then he put his hand across it. Monday, he said. 6:15. James shook it. And I want it in writing, Robert said. The 24 and the overtime. On a piece of paper with your name on it. Not because I don't trust you. His jaw worked. Because I need to see it. One time in my life, I need to see what was promised to me written down. James got a pen, wrote it on the back of whatever was on the table, which happened to be the foreclosure notice, because that's what was on the table. Signed it. Dated it. Robert folded it 4 times. Tucked it into his shirt pocket, over his heart. And did not take it out again for a very long time. Monday came the way hard things always come. Without announcement. Without ceremony. Just the alarm at 4:40 and the cold floor, and the 1 minute in the dark. Except this time the 1 minute lasted about 4 seconds, before James was already up and moving because lying still was no longer something his body would permit. Robert Williams was at the bay door at 6:13. 2 minutes early. He had a thermos and a toolbox that had seen better decades, and he stood on the gravel in the dark looking at the building the way a man looks at a decision he's already made and is now standing inside of. James rolled up the bay door, and Robert walked in and set his box down in the second bay and opened it and started laying tools out by size without being asked. They didn't talk about what day it was. They didn't talk about the 22 days. They talked about the 2018 Transit in the first bay that needed a water pump and an assessment on the rear differential, and that was enough for the first hour. Then Tuesday happened. Michael Johnson called 11 shops in 3 counties before noon. James didn't know the exact number until Gary told Robert 3 weeks later, and Robert told James, who sat with that number for a while and thought about what it cost a man to spend a Tuesday morning making 11 phone calls about someone else's employee. What it said about how much space James Smith occupied in Michael Johnson's head. More than a one-lift garage on a dead-end street should occupy anyone's head, which told you everything about which man was actually worried about which. Wednesday, Donna Ellis came in. She came in sideways, through the door the way she always did, except this time she wasn't apologizing. She was moving with a specific kind of purpose that James recognized as someone who had made up their mind about something in the car on the way over and was not going to be talked out of it. "I heard something at the Kroger," she said. James looked up from the counter. "Miss Donna, I heard you're bidding on the Johnson trucks." She set her coin purse on the counter and opened it, and James's stomach dropped straight through the floor because he already knew. "It's $410. Fast, like she'd been rehearsing the delivery. "It's from my sister Ruth's insurance. 2019. I've had it in a coffee can under the sink, and I have not touched $1 of it, and I am 74 years old, and I do not need it. And if you say one word about my dialysis or my hip, I will hit you with this purse, and I have been told I have a strong swing." James could not speak. "You put brakes on my car," Donna Ellis said, "and you didn't take my $30. And I went home that night, and I sat in my kitchen, and I cried, James. And I am not a crier. Ask anyone." She pushed the money across the counter. "So you're going to take this, or I am going to come into this shop every single day and make a scene, and I have nothing but time and a reliable vehicle thanks to you." "Miss Donna." His voice came out wrong. "It's $400. I owe $18,000. It won't do anything. It can't do one single thing except take your sister's money and put it towards something it can't fix. That's why I can't. That is not for you to decide." Her voice had an edge he'd never heard before. Not angry. Something older than angry. 15 years you've been deciding what people are allowed to give you. Every single one of us, you decide. And we sit there, and we take it, and we say thank you, and we go home. You know what that feels like, James? To only ever be allowed to receive? To never get to give anything back? She looked at him across the counter. "Do you know what it feels like to be somebody who can only take?" The shop was quiet enough to hear the compressor and Robert's wrench from the second bay and nothing else. "No, ma'am," James said. "I don't." "Well." She snapped the coin purse shut. "Now you do." She walked out. James stood there and looked at $410 on his counter and cried for the second time since Carol died. Standing up in his own shop in front of Robert Williams, who was under a truck in the second bay and did not look up. Not once. Not for any reason. God bless him. The compliance call came Thursday morning. The woman was polite, professional, reading from something she'd read many times before. Was James aware that their vendor policy included background screening for all personnel with access to fleet assets? Was he aware that certain criminal histories could constitute disqualifying factors under their federal highway operating requirements? "Yes, ma'am," James said. "I'm aware. And you're confirming that you currently employ." His name is Robert Williams. He's 26 years old. He served 9 months when he was 20 for something stupid that he has spent 6 years paying for every single day at a shop across town, where the owner used it as a leash. James said it the way he'd said everything this week. Flat. True. No decoration. He is the best technician in this county. He is the only man I would trust to put brakes on a vehicle that my daughter rides behind. If that disqualifies me, then disqualify me today so I can get back to work. A very long pause. "Mr. Smith." Her voice had changed, lost something laminated about it. "I've made over 200 of these calls. Nobody has ever just said yes. You asked me a question," James said. "I gave you the answer." Thursday night James couldn't eat. Maya sat across from him and pushed her food around and watched him not eat his and finally said, "Dad, you're going to throw up." "I might." "Are you scared?" "Yeah," James said. "I am." She put her fork down. She'd never heard him say that. Not once. In her entire memory of him. And she went still the way people go still when they hear a sound they didn't know a person could make. "You want to hear something?" James pushed his plate aside. "When I was 23, I broke down on the interstate with your mom in the passenger seat and $11 in my pocket. Middle of the night. February. A man stopped. Old guy named Earl. Towed us 40 miles, fixed my water pump in his driveway, wouldn't take a dime." He looked at his hands on the table. "I've told you that story 100 times. I know. Here's the part one never told you." He was quiet for a moment. "After Earl drove off, your mom sat in that car and she said, 'Cal, that's the kind of man I want you to be.' And I said, 'Baby, that man's got a wrecker and a driveway and a house. I've got $11. He paused, and she said, "He didn't have any of that in 71 either." He just stopped. Maya didn't say anything. 15 years I've been chewing on that, James said. And tomorrow at 8 in the morning, I get 20 minutes to find out if she was right. Maya looked at her father across the kitchen table with the specific calm of someone who has already decided something you haven't caught up to yet. "Mama was right about everything. You told me that yourself." He got there at 6:40 for an 8 o'clock. David Jones was already in the lobby, sitting in one of the chairs, with a paper cup of coffee he wasn't drinking, in his good jacket, the one with the snag on the left sleeve he'd been meaning to fix. Robert Williams was beside him in a collared shirt, sitting on the edge of his chair the way you sit when you're in a hospital waiting room, and the news could go either way. And 4 other drivers James had never met. James stopped in the door. Denny, a different name on his tongue, force of habit, from the story, corrected now. David. He looked down the row of them. "I asked for one." David Jonas stood up. "Word got around. We talked about it in the yard last night. About 3 hours worth. They'll fire you for this." "Might." David shrugged. "Not casual. Considered. Not a single one of us has said a true word in that building in 19 years. Figured we'd try it once and see what it actually costs." At 7:58 a.m. woman in a headset came through the glass door. "Mr. Smith? They're ready." James stood up, sat back down, put his head down for about 4 seconds, and Robert Williams, close enough to hear, heard him say something very quiet, something that wasn't for the room. Something said to a person who wasn't there, but was, in some way, that James Smith had decided a long time ago to stop questioning, always there. Then he stood up and went in. 9 people around a long table. Expensive chairs. The kind of room that had been designed to make you feel the distance between yourself and the people already sitting in it. Patricia Johnson at the far end, and she did not look at him, immediately, clearly, deliberately, and James understood, without being told, that she had been instructed not to. That whatever happened in this room had to happen, without her fingerprints on it. The man in the middle stood up. Compact. 60 maybe. The kind of face that had been making decisions for so long it had stopped looking like it was making them. Harold Denworth, Chief Financial Officer. He did not offer his hand. "Mr. Smith, before we begin, I want to be transparent with you because I think it's a kindness. Do you know why you're on this agenda?" "Yes, sir." Denworth blinked. That surprised him. "You do. Because your CEO asked for me, and you couldn't say no to her face. So you put me at 8 o'clock in the morning in a room that's still cold, and you gave the national firm 60 minutes at 11, with pastries at 10:30. That's why I'm on the agenda." James looked at him steadily. "I'm not saying that as an accusation, sir. I'm saying it because it's true, and I only have 20 minutes, and I'd rather spend 16 of them on something useful." The room was very quiet. At the far end, Patricia Johnson looked at the table, and something happened at the corner of her mouth that she did not allow to go any further. Denworth sat back down. Slowly. He stopped. Restarted. "Mr. Smith, you have one lift." "Yes, sir." "One technician." "Yes, sir." "And a foreclosure notice, with a sale date 4 days from today." "Yes, sir." "And you're bidding on a $2.4 million a year fleet maintenance contract." "No, sir," James said. Denworth stopped. "I'm bidding 1.4. Somebody's pen hit the table. Mr. Smith. Denworth's voice recalibrated. That's $1 million below the incumbent vendor. That's not a bid. He searched for the word. Nobody can do the work for that. It isn't possible. It's possible if you actually do the work. Explain that. James put the spiral notebook on the table. Your current vendor bills $480 per unit for a 90-day preventive maintenance. For visits a year, 406 trucks. That's $780,000 a year in PMs alone. He opened the notebook. A real PM on a box truck is 90 minutes. 90 minutes of labor, filters, oil, brake inspection, meaning a technician pulls a wheel and looks at what's there. He looked up. They're doing them in 12 minutes. Some in 15. I have 19 drivers who have watched it happen. I have dates. I have truck numbers. And I have a man in your lobby right now who wrote up his brakes 4 times in 5 months on green cards and got 4 stickers back that said serviced, and then drove a fully loaded box truck down a grade at 62 miles an hour and put it in a ditch when the pedal went to the floor. Harold Denworth went white. Not pale. White. That is, he put both hands flat on the table. Mr. Smith, that is a very serious allegation, and you cannot walk into this room and... I'm not making an allegation, sir. I'm making a bid. James kept his voice level. The reason my number is $1 million lower than theirs isn't because I'm cutting corners or underpaying workers or hoping to renegotiate in year 2. It's because I'm not charging you for 78 minutes of nothing on 406 trucks 4 times a year. That's the entire difference. He looked at Denworth. You're not overpaying for labor, sir. You're paying for air. $1 million a year of air. The room sat with that. A man to Denworth's left, younger, with the look of someone who ran numbers for a living and had just run one he didn't expect, said quietly, Harold. A pause. 78 minutes times 1,600 service events. He looked up. That's just under $1 million. Nobody said anything. Denworth stared at James. Even if every word of that is accurate, Denworth said carefully, choosing each word like footing on ice. You have one lift. You physically cannot service 406 vehicles. Not today, sir. No. Then this conversation is, how long does it take to build a bay? James said. Denworth stopped. A lift, a pad, a compressor line. If your company decided today, purchase order signed today, how long? Denworth looked at the man beside him. 6 weeks, the man said. Maybe 8. 6 weeks, James repeated. So the thing I don't have takes 6 weeks, and a purchase order. He put both hands flat on the table. Sir, how long does it take to build a man who won't sign a form he didn't touch? Nobody answered. Because nobody had an answer. Because it was not a question that had an answer in any room that ran on purchase orders and quarterly reviews. I've been trying to figure that out for 15 years, James said. Because I'd like to hire 4 of them. And here's what I've come up with. There's no purchase order for it. You cannot buy it. You cannot mandate it. You cannot performance review your way into it. You can only find it. And when you find it, sir, he tapped the notebook. You are almost always looking at a man who is flat broke. Every single time. Because that is the price of it. He let that sit. Then, you have 9 bays and a scanner and a bond 3 miles from here at a shop where the owner looked at a 74-year-old woman's hip before he quoted her a brake job. He is on your agenda at 1:30 this afternoon. He has everything I don't have. And in 4 years, he will do to you exactly what your current vendor has done to you. And you will be in this room again with a stack of green cards and a man in a ditch, and you will sit here wondering how it happened again. Denworth was very still. You're asking us to take a leap of faith. No, sir. James shook his head. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm 20 minutes into the worst month of my life, with 4 days left on my building, and I would rather chew glass than ask anyone in this room for anything. He picked up the notebook. I'm asking you to look at truck 47. Denworth blinked. 47. It's in your yard right now. Bay 4 back row. It has a shimmy at 55 miles per hour that has been written up 11 times in 2 years and come back no fault found 11 times. James closed the notebook. I stood next to it on Tuesday morning, from 6 feet away, never touched it, and I can tell you that's a worn tie rod end. I would bet this building on it. Which, as you've pointed out, I've only got 4 days of anyway. He stood up. Send anybody you want. Send your worst guy. Send your current vendor. It's a $9 part, and it has been, through a shop billing you $480 a visit 11 times. And there is a man who drives that truck at highway speed every day with a grandson at home. He picked up his coat. That's my bid. 1.4. 6 bays in 90 days. 3 techs named in writing. Every card signed by the hand. That turned the wrench. And if you ever find one that isn't, you tear the contract up that day. No notice. No cure period. I drive the truck back myself. He pushed in his chair. Mr. Smith, Denworth started. That's my 20 minutes, sir. There are 4 drivers and a man named David Jones in your lobby who took the morning off without pay to sit in those chairs. They're going to get in trouble for it. I would take it as a kindness if someone went out there and told them it was worth it. He looked down the length of the table, directly at Patricia Johnson, just for a moment. The truck sounds right, ma'am. That's all I came to say. He was at the door. Mr. Smith. Denworth's voice had changed completely. The professional distance gone. Something underneath it that had been moving since the tie rod comment and had just reached the surface. He was looking at his phone. He had typed something during the last 90 seconds. Someone had answered. I just had our yard supervisor walk out to Bay 4. Denworth set the phone down on the table with the care of a man setting down something he doesn't want to drop. Truck 47 is in the back row. He read from the screen. Tie rod end. About a 1/4 inch of play. He stopped. Looked up. He says he can move the wheel with his hand. Nobody in the room breathed. It's scheduled out at 4:30 this morning, Denworth said. His voice had gone very quiet. It's on the dispatch board. It has a load of medical supplies going to Jackson. Patricia Johnson stood up at the end of the table. Pull it, she said. Harold, pull it now. Denworth was already dialing, and James Smith stood in the doorway with his hand on the frame and his heart running like a compressor at full load, watching 9 people in a conference room turn and look at a mechanic in a clean shirt who had just told them the truth for free. The same way he'd told it in a parking lot in the rain 11 days ago, for a girl he hadn't known and hadn't needed to know. Denworth hung up, stood there a moment, then turned around and looked at James with the expression of a man who has been doing arithmetic for 22 years and has just been handed a number that doesn't work in any column he's ever used. Sit down, Mr. Smith, he said. And then, when James didn't move, please, sir, sit down. He pulled the chair out himself. James sat. You have 1 lift. 1 technician. A foreclosure sale in 96 hours. And I have absolutely no idea what to do with you. Denworth sat across from him. So let's start with the bank. There's nothing to start with, James said. I owe $18,240. They want it Friday. I don't have it. Can you get it? No, sir. I made 60 calls in 11 days. Every bank inside 100 miles. 2 credit unions. A finance company in Memphis that wanted 31% and turned me down anyway. There's nothing to get. I'm not being brave about it. It's just the number. Denworth looked down the table. Victoria, don't. Patricia was still standing. Don't look at me, Harold. It's not my decision. It never was. It's $2.4 million. 1.4, James said. And you're asking this company to award it to a man who will not own a building on Monday morning. I'm not asking anyone for anything, James said. I've said that 3 times, and I'll say it once more, and then I'm done. I came in here to tell you what's wrong with your trucks. That is the only thing I know how to do. I've told you. You can do whatever you want with it. He stood up again. Mr. Smith. Denworth said it in a completely different voice. The one underneath all the others. The one that had the weight of 22 years in it and was asking something it had never asked before. Please, give me 40 minutes. I have a vendor coming at 11, whose invoices I now need to look at differently. I would like to be able to do that with you still in the building. A pause. That's all. Sit in the lobby. Drink our coffee. 40 minutes. James sat in the lobby for 2 hours and 10 minutes. David Jones sat beside him the whole time and didn't say a word until the 90-minute mark when he turned his paper cup in his hands and said, They pulled 47 off the board. Men came out and told us. Yard supervisor wouldn't look at me when he said it. James said nothing. 19 years, David said. 19 years I put things on green cards. And you saw it, from 6 feet away on a Tuesday morning. Anybody could have seen it, David. No. David said it quietly. The way you say something you've thought about carefully. That's the thing you don't understand about yourself. Anybody could have looked. Nobody did. He turned the cup again. There's a difference. At 10:50, a black SUV pulled into the lot outside the lobby glass. Michael Johnson got out of it 3 hours early. Pressed shirt, leather folder under his arm. He came through the lobby doors and stopped. James, Robert, David Jones, 3 other drivers in a row. Michael stood there. James, Michael. Michael's eyes moved down the row. And James watched a man do arithmetic in real time and arrive at a sum he had not anticipated and did not like. What did you do? Michael said. Told them the truth. About what? 12-minute PMs. Michael's face changed by degrees. Slowly, like a building settling. And James, who had disliked him for 9 years and had reasons to, felt something he had not expected to feel standing here. Something that was adjacent to sorry. Because Michael had bid 2.1, James knew that, from something Gary had let slip once, 2 years back, and he'd built his whole number on the same assumption James had just walked into that conference room and dismantled. He hadn't known it was a lie. He'd just assumed everybody shaved a little. He'd assumed that was the business. That the business was everyone stealing a little and calling it efficiency. You bid under me, Michael said. $1 million under. Michael laughed. Wrong sound. You can't do the work for that. I do the work for that every day. You've been watching me do it for 9 years, through your window, and calling me soft. Michael stood in the lobby with his folder. Then, quiet. You know I don't have another 4 years in that building. I know, Michael. He stopped. That building. 9 bays. Something moved across his face. Something old. I owe everything in it. Every dollar. And I'm 46 years old, and I need 40 cars a week to make the note, and there are 20 in this town, and I have been running on the difference for 2 years. James looked at him. Michael went in and did his 45 minutes at 1:30, and he was good. James could acknowledge that. Polished. Slides. The leather folder opened to the right page every time, and Harold Denworth asked him one question at the end. How long does a 90-day PM run in your shop? And Michael said we're very efficient, usually in and out in under an hour. And something left the room like air going out. Michael felt it. James could see it on his face, through the lobby glass, when he came out. The look of a man who had heard a door close and wasn't sure which side of it he was on. The call came at 4:15 the following afternoon. James was under a Corolla. Robert said Mr. Smith in a voice that got James out from under that car faster than he'd moved in years. Denworth. 2 questions. 6 bays in 90 days. Can you actually do it? If someone signs a purchase order Monday morning, yes, sir. Concrete's the long pole. 60 days if the weather holds. Second question. A pause that had the weight of a room behind it. You said you'd name 3 technicians in writing. Name them. Robert Williams. He's standing right here. Silence. And the other 2? I don't have them yet. Silence. Mr. Smith, you understand what you just did. I told you I don't have them. Sir, every other firm handed you a roster. I was told the frontrunner has a man on it who's been dead since March. I checked. A pause. I had a chance to lie to you, and I used it to tell you I have 1 employee. Yes, Harold Denworth said. I know. That is the entire problem, and it may be the entire answer. And I've been awake since 3 in the morning trying to determine which. The board met Thursday. The foreclosure sale was Friday at 10. James worked all day Thursday. Didn't hear 1 word. Put a water pump in a Camry. Did an eye alignment on a Ranger because his machine was, from 1998, closed the register at 6. $360. Best day in a month. Didn't matter. Counted it twice anyway. Maya did homework under the lamp. Dad. Yeah, baby. If they take the shop, where do we go? He sat down on the stool. I don't know. Probably find work in Clarksville. I'm a good mechanic. I'd get on somewhere. Would your name be on the building? No. Maya looked at her homework for a while. That's okay, she said. You'd still be the one doing it right. James put his head down on his own workbench and laughed until it became the other thing. And Maya came and put her hand on the back of his neck and didn't say anything because she had learned that from him. At 6:40 the next morning, 3 hours and 20 minutes before the foreclosure sale, a black Mercedes came off Callaway Street alone. No second car, no filing cabinet. Patricia Johnson got out by herself. James was standing in the bay with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. The morning was clear and cold, and the gravel was still dark from overnight frost. "Mr. Smith." "Ma'am." She stood there a moment, looked at the building, at the sign, at the crack in the gravel, where the pothole had been there for 6 years. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said. "Legal told me not to come. Harold told me not to come. My head of communications drove me here, and is currently sitting in his car at the end of the block, not looking in this direction." "Then why'd you come?" "Because I wanted to say it in this building." She looked at him. "You won." James didn't move. "Say it again." "You won the contract. 1.4. 6 bays in 90 days. Capital advanced against the contract at 4%. That is a loan, Mr. Smith. It is on paper, and Harold will personally enjoy collecting every dollar of it." 9-1 on the vote. James set the coffee down because his hand wasn't steady enough to hold it. "Harold voted yes," Patricia said, "because he pulled the Fleet Corps invoices going back 6 years. $11 million. He found 41 service events billed on days when the trucks were logged out on the road. He had signed off on every single one of them. Every one. For 6 years." Her voice was steady, careful. "He came to my office at 2 in the morning, and he said, 'Victoria,' he always calls me Victoria when it's serious, he said, 'a man with one lift saw it in 11 days, and I didn't see it in 6 years, and I don't know how I'm supposed to live with that.'" A pause. I said, "Vote your conscience, Harold." And he said, "That's what I'm afraid of." James stood in his garage. "The bank," he said, "is not my business. I told you that 19 days ago, and I meant it, and I still mean it." Patricia's chin came up. "I did one thing. I'm going to tell you what it was, and you can be as angry about it as you like." She met him level. "I had my counsel send First Cumberland a copy of an executed vendor agreement worth $1.4 million a year for 5 years, with your name on it, and a letter stating that the agreement is contingent on your continued ownership of this parcel." A pause. "That is not a gift. That is a fact. They can do whatever they want with a fact." Thomas Rodriguez called at 8:51. James picked it up on the first ring. "Mr. Smith." Thomas's voice was strange in a way James hadn't heard from him before. "The sale is off. They restructured it. 7 years at 6.2. A pause. "I want to tell you something, and then I need to go be briefly ill in the parking lot. I've worked at this bank for 4 years. I have never seen the committee reverse a foreclosure proceeding. Not one time." Another pause. "A man upstairs looked at that letter this morning and said, and I am quoting directly, 'We are not going to be the bank that foreclosed on him.'" "I know," James said. "Does that bother you?" "That it wasn't." "Thomas." James looked at the crack in his concrete floor. "I stopped needing it to be pretty about 15 years ago. I just needed the door open at 6:15. The concrete crew broke ground on the 4th of January. 6 bays and a lube pit. And on the day they poured, James walked out with a stick and knelt in the wet concrete in the far corner, where the parts washer would go, where nobody would see it, unless they were looking for it, and wrote, RS 1988. And underneath that, CS always. Robert ran 3 texts by March and 4 by June. Every card in the drawer. Every signature matched to a hand that had turned the wrench. And when the state auditor came through in September and pulled 40 cards at random and looked up from the drawer and said, "Who taught you to document like this?" Robert Williams said, "My boss," and did not elaborate. David Jones got a card in the mail in February, an envelope from Harold Denworth's office with a check inside and a handwritten note that David never showed anyone and kept in the visor of truck 47 until the day he retired. Michael Johnson sold Cray Precision in September. James heard it. Before it happened, Callaway Street was 400 feet wide, and there were no secrets on it. He walked across one Tuesday afternoon. First time in 9 years. Michael was sitting in his own waiting room, with the TV on mute, which was somehow worse than anything James had imagined. "Came to look," Michael said. "Came to make an offer." Michael laughed. "The real one, not the street-filling version." something underneath it. You're going to buy me for 40 cents on the dollar. I'm going to buy your 9 bays for what they're worth, James said. And I want you to run them. Michael's head came up. I need a fleet manager. I'm turning wrenches on 400 trucks at 40 years old because I don't know how to stop. You ran 9 bays for 9 years and made payroll every Friday in a town with 20 cars in it. That's not nothing, Michael. That is genuinely hard. You hate me. I did. Simple. True. You said what you said about the bus. I'm not going to pretend I forgot it. Then why? James sat down across from him. Because a man named Earl stopped for me on the interstate in February of 1994 and wouldn't take $1 and drove away. And I've been trying to pay him back for 30 years, and I can't. He's gone. The debt doesn't go away just because the person you owe it to is gone. The only thing you can do with it is hand it forward. He looked at Michael. You're just standing there. That's all it ever is. Someone in reach. Michael sat with his hands over his face for a long time. Terms, he said finally. You never quote another price in this building. That's mine. You never look at someone's hip before you look at their car. And the first time I see you doing the math on what somebody can be talked into, James stood up. I won't yell. I'll just open the door. That's it. That's it. Michael Cray worked for James Smith for 11 years and never quoted a price. Not one time. Not once. Sarah Rodriguez came by most Saturdays that first year. Then most Saturdays for 4 years after that. She and Maya sat on the toolbox and ate sandwiches and argued about music and whether a person could learn to parallel park by feel alone, which Sarah maintained was possible, and Maya maintained was how you ended up on a curb. Sarah learned to run a torque wrench. Badly. Enthusiastically. With a complete absence of the anxiety that had been in her hands when James first watched them grip a steering wheel. In her 3rd year of college, she told Patricia she was switching her major. Patricia asked to what? Sarah said, anything where someone hands you something because they want to. Not because they're calculating the return. Patricia didn't understand it. Signed the form anyway. On a Friday evening in May, 20 months after a girl drove 11 miles on a bare rim and stopped because she thought no one would see her, they turned on the sign. It cost $4,000. James had argued with the sign company for 6 weeks about this. The owner of the sign company, a patient man named Anthony, had finally said, Mr. Smith, you have waited 17 years for this sign. And James had said, what does that have to do with the price? And Anthony had said absolutely nothing, and I just needed to say it out loud. The whole street came out. Donna Ellis in front with her coin purse. David Jones with his grandson on his shoulders. Robert Williams at the back, with his hands in his pockets, and a folded envelope in his shirt. Gary, who had never told Michael what he'd said in the lobby, that Tuesday morning, standing quietly to one side, with his hands in his jacket. Maya Brooks, 10 years old, standing beside her father in the cold. The sign came on. Smith's Auto and Tire. And below it, because Maya had argued for it, with the particular persistence of a person who knows they are right and is prepared to wait as long as necessary. St. 1988. Maya looked up at it, at the light, at her father's name in it. Dad, she said, I always knew this place was going to be something. James Smith looked at his shop, at the 6 bays he'd poured in January, at the 9 across the street that now bore his name too, at the drivers and the old women and the men who worked for him, at a crack in the concrete in the 2nd bay that he had never once filled in because it was his and it was real, and some things you leave exactly where they landed. He put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Baby, he said. It always was. He looked out at the street. At all of them. People just finally looked.